Nobody talks about $20,000. They talk about millions. They talk about Lambos and beach, houses and passive income that pays for your life while you sleep. But the number that will actually change everything for you, the number that separates the people who eventually win from the people who stay stuck forever, is 20,000. That's it. That's the whole secret nobody is telling you. And today, we're going to talk about it. All of it. Let me start with something brutal and honest. Because you deserve the truth more than you deserve comfort. Right now, if the number sitting in your bank account is below $20,000, your life is not just tight. Your life is fragile. Dangerously fragile. And I don't say that to scare you or shame you. I say it because understanding exactly where you are. Standing is the only way you are ever going to move. Think about what life looks like below that number. Really think about it. When you have $1,000 in savings and your car breaks down, that isn't just an inconvenience. That is a catastrophe. That is a spiral. Because now you can't pay your mechanic without dipping into your rent money. And now your rent is short. And now you're calling your landlord begging for 3 more days. And maybe you take out a payday loan to cover it. And now you're paying 400% interest on borrowed money just to stay afloat. You see how fast it unravels? You see how one flat tire can become a 6-month nightmare? That's not bad luck. That's what life looks like without a financial floor under your feet. There's actually a name for this. Economists and physicists alike talk about something called escape velocity. When a rocket launches into space, it burns more fuel in the first few minutes than it does for the rest of the entire journey combined. Why? Because in those first moments, it is fighting the Earth's gravitational pull at its absolute strongest. It's fighting atmospheric resistance at its thickest. Everything is pushing back against it with maximum force. For most ordinary working people in America today, the zone between $0 and $20,000 is that gravity well. You aren't just trying to move forward. You are fighting every single day just to stay in place. And the cruel irony of being broke is that being broke is expensive. Think about that for a second. When your bank balance falls below the minimum, the bank charges you a fee. When your rent is late, the landlord charges you a penalty. When you can't afford quality shoes, you buy cheap ones every year instead of good ones that last a decade. The poor pay more for everything, in every direction, all the time. Poverty isn't just painful, it is mathematically punishing. Charlie Munger, one of the sharpest financial minds who ever lived, had a famous saying. He said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch." That was true in his era. But measured against today's economic environment, against the cost of rent and groceries and healthcare and just existing in America, right now, the real psychological threshold for ordinary people is $20,000. That is the number where things actually start to shift. And here is the thing that most financial content creators will never say out loud because it doesn't sound exciting enough. Before you reach $20,000, no investment strategy on earth can actually help you. Stop thinking about dividend stocks. Stop thinking about crypto plays. Stop thinking about compound interest curves. Because when your starting principal is nearly zero, even 100% return is still zero. You could double nothing and still have nothing. The math doesn't care about your optimism. The math only cares about your starting number. So the question becomes, how do you get there? How do you escape the gravity? And the answer is not sexy. It is not a hack. It is not a trick. It is pure, grinding, deliberate accumulation. You sell your time and your labor. You live more frugally than feels comfortable. You say no to things that feel like they deserve a yes. And you stack. $1 at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 sacrifice at a time. This phase is physical. There is no algorithm for it, but it ends. It always ends. And what happens when it ends is something nobody fully prepared you for. Because the moment you cross $20,000, something changes inside your brain. Not outside, inside. The number in your account changes the chemistry in your mind. Psychologists call it cognitive bandwidth. Here's how it works. When you are financially stressed, your brain is constantly running a background process. It's calculating. Can I pay rent this month? What if something breaks? What if I get sick? What if I lose my job? That background process never stops. It's running every minute of every day, quietly eating up the mental energy you could be using to think clearly, to plan, to solve problems, to innovate. Research published in the journal Science found that financial stress effectively lowers your functional IQ by 13 to 14 points. That is worse than going an entire night without sleep. That is the cognitive equivalent of being mildly intoxicated all day, every day, without even knowing it. This is why good people stuck in financial hardship sometimes make decisions that look irrational from the outside. Buying lottery tickets, taking predatory loans, spending money on things they can't afford. It isn't stupidity. It isn't a lack of values. It is a brain that is operating under siege, that is so flooded with survival anxiety that there is simply no bandwidth left for long-term thinking. The mind cannot plan for 5 years from now when it is terrified about 5 days from now. But when you save $20,000, that background process quiets down. The alarm stops screaming. Your brain shifts, almost automatically, from survival mode into strategy mode. Suddenly you can think 3 months ahead, then 6 months, then 3 years. You become noticeably better at your job, more patient in your relationships, calmer under pressure. Not because you read a self-help book, because you turned off the alarm that had been blaring in your skull for years. And there is something else that $20,000 buys you that nobody talks about. It buys you the power to say no. Picture 2 co-workers, same job title, same salary, same skill level, but one of them, Jack, has nothing in his account. Maybe he's got $1,000 in credit card debt. The other one, Mike, has $20,000 sitting quietly in a savings account. Now the boss comes in and asks them both to do something unreasonable. Work the weekend for free, push a product they know has problems, smile through something that crosses a clear ethical line. What does Jack do? Jack's heart rate spikes. His brain floods with cortisol. His entire nervous system goes into threat response. And even though every part of him is screaming no, he says yes. He nods. He goes along with it. Because the alternative, losing this job, missing rent, defaulting on his car payment, is unthinkable. Jack isn't weak. Jack is financially trapped, and trapped people cannot negotiate from strength. Now Mike has 6 months to a year of living expenses sitting in that account. When the boss makes the same request, Mike's nervous system doesn't light up. He evaluates the request calmly. He looks the boss in the eye and says, "I don't think that's the right move. Can we look at other options?" And if the situation truly crosses a line, Mike can walk, not because he wants chaos, but because he genuinely has the option to leave and survive. The boss knows this, even if it's never said out loud, and that knowledge changes the entire dynamic of every conversation they ever have. That $20,000 is not money. It is leverage. It is armor. It is the difference between being someone who can negotiate and someone who can only comply. Now let's talk about math, because math is where the real magic lives. Einstein called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. But here's the part nobody explains properly. Compound interest has a prerequisite. It requires critical mass, like a nuclear reactor that won't sustain a chain reaction unless you have enough fissile material. Compound interest won't work unless your starting principal is large enough to matter in your actual life. Here is the illustration. You are a brilliant investor. You study the market obsessively. You beat the professionals and earn 10% annually, which is extraordinary. If your starting amount is $1,000, your 10% return gives you $100. $100. That's a nice dinner. That's 2 tanks of gas. And then it's gone, absorbed into the ordinary costs of existing, leaving 0 structural change in your life. The snowball you tried to start has no mass. It doesn't roll. It just sits there. Now start with $20,000, same 10% return. That's $2,000 for most American families. $2,000 is a month of rent. It's 2 months of groceries. It is a real number that represents real relief. And now the snowball has a core. Now it rolls. Now you are not fighting alone. Because you have acquired an invisible partner who works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never asks for a raise, never calls in sick and never complains. That partner is your capital, quietly compounding in your name. Using the rule of 72, which tells you how long it takes to double your money at a given rate of return. $20,000 invested in a broad index fund at 7 to 10%, annually doubles roughly every 7 to 10 years. So the progression looks like this. 20,000 becomes 40, 40 becomes 80, 80 becomes 160, 160 becomes 320, 320 becomes 640. You do not need to add a single additional dollar. You just need to not touch it and let time do what time does when capital is properly positioned. But reaching $20,000 and then protecting it are 2 completely different challenges. And this is where most people fail. Not at the accumulation stage, at the filter. There is a concept in science called the Fermi paradox, which raises the question of why, given the billions of potentially habitable planets in the universe, we haven't encountered other intelligent life. One of the answers is the Great Filter Theory, the idea that somewhere in the progression from simple life to advanced civilization, there is a threshold so difficult that the vast majority of species never make it through. In the journey toward financial independence, 20,000 is that filter. Statistics show that a large percentage of ordinary American workers have actually had $20,000 saved at some point in their lives, maybe more than once, but they never pass through the filter. Because the moment that money exists in your account, the temptations are overwhelming in a way they weren't before. Here's the trap. You have been eating instant noodles for 2 years. You have been driving a car that embarrasses you. You have been saying no to trips, dinners, events, experiences. And now, finally, you have $20,000 in the bank. Your brain screams that you have earned a reward, that you have arrived, that it is time to celebrate the sacrifice. And right at that exact moment, your 10-year-old car breaks down outside a dealership where a brand new SUV is sitting in the window with a $20,000 down payment tag on it. That is the filter. And most people drive that car off the lot and feel proud doing it. What they don't see is what they actually did. They didn't buy a car. They killed the compounding process before it had a chance to breathe. They traded future freedom for present tense approval. The car loses 20% of its value the moment it leaves the lot. It adds insurance costs, higher gas costs, and a monthly payment that chains them back to a job they hate. The gravity well reopens, and this time, because they have tasted comfort. The climb back up is harder than the first time. And it is not only internal temptation you have to fight. There are external forces too. Sociologists call it the crab bucket effect. Put one crab in a bucket and it crawls out. Put several crabs in a bucket, and every time one tries to climb, the others pull it back down. When you start refusing expensive dinners, when you stop buying new clothes every season, when you start talking about index funds instead of the game last night, the people around you get uncomfortable. Not because they are bad people, but because your discipline is a mirror held up to their indulgence. They don't want you to pass the filter because passing, it means entering a world they haven't earned access to yet. To get through the filter, you have to become a little weird. You have to get comfortable being the one who drives the old car and wears last year's shoes and says no to Vegas trips. You have to find your satisfaction in watching the number in your account grow instead of watching your closet fill up. This is not deprivation. This is redirection. You are not giving up pleasure. You are trading short-term pleasure for long-term sovereignty. Now, assuming you pass the filter, your $20,000 is still intact. You are still in the game. Here is the blueprint for what happens next. You divide that capital into 2 strategic buckets. The first bucket, $5,000 to $10,000, goes into a high-yield savings account or short-term government bonds. This is your bulletproof vest. It is completely untouchable. It is not there to grow. It is there to protect. It is the money that steps in front of the bullet when life fires at you. When the car breaks down, when the medical bill arrives, when the layoff happens. This money absorbs the blow so that you do not have to liquidate your investments at the worst possible moment. This is the #1 reason most people lose money in market downturns. Not because the market was bad, because they had no cushion and were forced to sell at the bottom. The second bucket, $10,000 to $15,000, is your soldiers. These go into low-cost index funds that track the broad market, not individual stocks, not options, not crypto. The whole haystack, not the needle. You are not trying to be clever here. You are trying to own a piece of every productive company in America and let the entire economy grow on your behalf over time. But investment alone is too slow. You also need a turbocharger, and the most powerful turbocharger available to any person at this stage of the journey is investing in yourself. Take $1,000, not to gamble in the market, but to acquire a skill, a certification, a course, a credential. If it doesn't work, you lost $1,000 in some time. That is the downside. The upside? That skill could add $500 a month to your income, which is $6,000 a year, which is $60,000 over 10 years. Name one legal investment in any financial market that offers that rate of return. You can't. Human capital is the highest yielding asset available to someone with limited resources, and almost nobody is talking about it. There are 3 mistakes at this stage that will erase everything. First, do not use leverage. Do not borrow to invest. A minor market correction will wipe you out completely, and you will start over from nothing. Second, do not touch complex derivatives. Options, futures, high-frequency strategies. These are professional tools in the hands of people who have structural, informational advantages over you. You are not competing on a level field. You are walking into a slaughterhouse. Third, do not rush to buy a house with $20,000. It sounds responsible and traditional, but a home purchase at this capitalization level will destroy your cash flow, eliminate your refusal power, and chain you to a mortgage that makes quitting your job unthinkable. Be patient. $100,000 is the next target. Get there first. And finally, let's talk about what all of this is actually for. Because the point is not the number. The point is what the number buys you. Cortisol is the hormone your body produces under stress. Chronic financial stress keeps cortisol elevated constantly. And chronically elevated cortisol destroys your sleep, damages your immune system, shortens your patience with your kids, accelerates aging, and poisons relationships. The stress of being broke is not just emotional, it is biological. It is a slow disease. When you save $20,000, even before you spend $1 of it, your cortisol drops. You sleep better. You fight less with your partner about money. You are more present with your children. You are more effective at work. That invisible health dividend, that quiet biochemical shift, is worth more than the money itself. True wealth is not measured in yachts. It is measured in mornings where you wake up and decide what your day looks like, instead of having someone else decide it for you. It is the ability to say no without your hands shaking. It is sleeping through the night. It is choosing work because it means something to you, not because you are terrified of what happens if you stop. $20,000 cannot buy a yacht, but it can buy back your rationality, your dignity, and your right to say no. And once you have those three things, everything else becomes possible. The game has already started. The only question is whether you are playing it.